Chapter 25 New King. No one dared to look at Kronos at this moment. Even Hyperion and Oceanus, who had thought about the throne of the God King, were silent at this moment. The curse of Uranus before leaving was heard clearly by the gods. If it was any other curse, they would not take it to heart, but the one just now was different. Not only because of the object of the curse, but also because it reminded them of the warning given by the existence that was still considered to be the god of prophecy in the underworld hundreds of years ago. You will rise with this, and you will fall with this. Kronos used his son to plot against his father, and used weapons to obtain the throne. Does it also indicate that he will be betrayed by his own children and lose his royal power under force? No one knows, but no one dares to guarantee that this will not happen. You know, the throne of the God King of the Father is given by the world, so pure force cannot replace him. But if Kronos becomes the God King, this throne obtained by force will no longer be endorsed by the world. But in any case, time does not stop because of the silence of the gods. When no gods in the world raised objections to Kronos' position as the God King, power began to shift to him in the dark. Since there is no orthodox God King recognized by the world, a leader recognized by the gods is barely feasible. If no one challenges Kronos within 500 years, he will be the second generation of God King of Chaos. During this period, although he cannot fully enjoy the authority of the God King, the powerful power has begun to transfer to him. Children, you have won. In silence, the scarred Earth Mother came from a distance. In the previous battle, she suffered no less damage than her children. It's just that she did not appear on the front battlefield, but constantly mobilized the power of the earth to block the downward pressure of the sky. She also heard the curse just now, but she still acted as if she didn't hear it. At such a moment, she didn't want to worry about the future that she didn't know how long it would be. Hearing this, the gods all reacted. They no longer had a stern face, but began to celebrate the victory and Kronos' enthronement. No matter what they thought in their hearts, facing the strongest among the Titans, Kronos, who was holding a high-level artifact, they all expressed their recognition of his position as the king of gods. You are right, Mother. We should hold a banquet to celebrate today's victory. Listening to the congratulations of the gods, Kronos forced a smile and said to the Titans. But I think we should deal with one thing first, Kronos. Suddenly, Mnemosyne on the side spoke. Her body was still covered with blood, and her wounds slowly recovered under the power of God. She came from a pit in the distance, where she had smashed the pit herself. But at this moment, Mnemosyne seemed to have forgotten the pain, and she looked at her former brother, now her eldest brother, with anger on her face. That god of prophecy, that thief. He stole my priesthood of memory. You all felt it, right at the beginning of the battle, chaos consciousness exposed his disguise. He is the god of spirituality, and he did something that angered the world. We should punish him, she said, in Hades, where the world consciousness tells the gods. Yes, before celebrating the victory, we should punish a sinner. Iapetus also supported. He thought everyone would think so. After all, it was Ryan's prophecy that made everyone suffer. But unexpectedly, after him, no one took over his words, and everyone's expressions were a little embarrassed. Ahem, my brother. Hyperion said, the world's consciousness only appeared 7 days ago. Even if we punish him now, we won't get a reward. Yes, Chaos's consciousness is always so rigid. When his offense to the world is completed, the world's reward for him will be cancelled. Theseus also echoed. This eldest sister of the Titan rarely speaks. But what about my priesthood? Mnemosyne was a little confused. Is it necessary to discuss punishing a weak prophecy god? Even if there is no reward from the world, it is fine to simply use him to reflect the majesty of the new court of gods. I want him to be my subordinate god. The priesthood cannot be transferred, but the main god and the subordinate god can borrow for a long time. The corner of Kronos' mouth twitched. The priesthood cannot be transferred, and he thought so at the beginning. But he is not as simple as we think, Mnemosyne. The Lord of the Ocean did not seem to want to beat around the bush. He said directly to his sister, just 7 days ago, when we were still fighting with the Father God, the two people in the land of eternal night went to the underworld. The power of the two of you is too weak, so you can't sense it. On the previous birthday of the god, the two primitive ancient gods used the origin to speed up the birth of the new god. Obviously, they are going to cause trouble for the god of spirituality. Hearing this, Iapetus said no more. He understood what his brother meant. If the two primordial gods took action personally, either Ryan had been thrown into the abyss and accepted the punishment of the world's will, then they would not be able to find anyone. Or the other party used some method to make the two gods of the night return empty-handed. In that case, they would not have any solution. Including Gaia, all the gods here now combined are not enough for the Dark Master to beat with one hand. After all, the other party's power can compete with Uranus at his peak, and what they faced before was only the Father of Heaven, whose power was greatly damaged and less than 30% of his peak. That's it. After looking at his sister, who was still a little unwilling, Kronos didn't want to delay any longer. If possible, he wanted to attack the guy who devoured his origin more than anyone else, but now he could only give up. Not to mention the other party's usual mysterious style and the means to make the original god give in, the other party's prophecy alone made him sleepless. He now understands his father. The father used the Titans as toys countless times, but never took action against Ryan. This is the deterrence brought by the mysterious fate. Other Titans cannot care, after all, they did not ask Ryan for a prophecy, but Kronos is different. He began to regret why he asked Ryan about his future before. If he didn't know, he would at least not be in such a dilemma as he is now. Let's go back to Mount Odysseus. Mother's creations are always so delicious. The mood was a little more depressed. The future god king, who should have been in high spirits at this moment, forced himself to look happier and then flew towards the sacred mountain first. Let's go. We'll talk about the priesthood later. Looking at her sister, Rhea, the only one who was somewhat aware of Kronos' condition, also said. Seeing that everyone said so, Mnemosyne had to suppress her reluctance and chose to fly to the sacred mountain with the Titans. She didn't dare to act alone. Even the previous Ryan was the god of time with a power level of 9, and he was much more powerful than her, the god of language and writing, with a power level of 8. The gods left one after another, and when the war of gods ended, the earth returned to peace. As time passed, it slowly recovered from the damage it had suffered. Half a day later, on Mount Odylus, a banquet to celebrate the accession of the new king began. Chapter 26 Artifact. Shua-. In the spirit world, Ryan painted the last stroke and looked at his work with satisfaction. The god king was pierced through the chest, but his expression did not look ferocious. He whispered gently, as if he was teaching his children. Opposite him, the god of time and space holding a knife was full of anger, and the expressions of the Titans were different. At the bottom of the picture, Ryan also thoughtfully painted a crack like a human face on the earth, which was the Mother Earth who had been paying attention. The next moment, although Chaos was very reluctant, the source of art and painting was still connected to the spirit world. Unlike stars, stars are physical, so Ryan could not swallow all the star source of chaos. But now, if there is no god symbolizing painting in 300 years, Chaos will never have this god born in the future. That's not the case. Maybe there will be a god of painting who has superb painting skills but no creativity at all. After sensing the absorption of the origin, Ryan once again confirmed that it was difficult for him to absorb the source power related to matter. This was determined by his original origin. Unless one day in the future, he can stand in the realm above the great divine power and thoroughly understand the root of everything. In addition to painting, there are also art and inspiration. The former is stronger and can last for 1,000 years before being sucked dry. The latter, pure inspiration and memory, are already in Ryan's bag. You are the first painting in the world, the origin of painting should favor you. You are the first work of art in the world, art regards you as the source. You record the end of the era, history should also have a share of you. He said. So the source power in the spiritual world began to gather on the scroll. Not surprisingly, 1,000 years later, when the origin related to chaos is exhausted, a divine artifact will be born. Taking a step forward, Ryan's figure disappeared in the palace. The next moment, he appeared out of thin air in the hollow mountain under his feet. There was nothing extra here, only a small pool in the middle, and the spring sprayed a liquid that seemed real and unreal. Ryan casually put Death of the God King into the pool and let it grow on its own. The pool is the manifestation of the root of the spiritual world, and the other artifacts that have not yet been born are all in it. Ryan looked at the pool. Located around the spring were 3 transformed oracle slabs. Is this the artifact of creation? In essence, it is a sacred object that is equal to great divine power. Even in the records of later generations, there are not many such powerful creations in the world of chaos. Somewhat emotionally, Ryan knew that Gaia had not realized the true power of these 3 oracle slabs before. Unlike other artifacts, the oracle slabs are rough embryos. Only when they are used will the power contained in them gradually reveal themselves. In the original history, Themis used it to write the code, so she was respected by the gods, and the jealous Hera never dared to offend her. The wise Metis used it to create hydrology, so her child was once the destined god king. But now, they have become the property of the spirit world. Even if the last slate is not yet complete, their power is still extraordinary. After seeing the slowly changing oracle, Ryan's eyes turned to their surroundings. 3 inferior embryos are surrounding them, which are artifacts spontaneously bred by the spirit world. Time, space, and life. Unfortunately, the source of space is still too little. After all, I didn't get the corresponding priesthood before. Ryan shook his head. Although the 3 embryos with undetermined forms are very powerful, the one of space is obviously not as good as the other 2, because the origin of space in the spirit world comes only from Kronos. But even so, when it is born, it is at least a high-level artifact, which is enough to make any god crazy. The other 2, the part of time, integrates the origin and sequence of time of Kronos as well as the past, present and future symbolized by history, calendar and prophecy. It is already very close to the artifact of creation, but it is still a little short. Ryan estimated that it would take another 1 or 2 epochs of time to make up for the shortcomings. As for the embryo of life, it was bred by most of the life source power taken from the life Aquarius. The complete life Aquarius will gradually become stronger with the prosperity of chaos. It should have become the artifact of creation symbolizing the beginning of all things, but it has lost most of its origin, and it is destined to be the same as the one bred in the spirit world, and it will never be able to break through the last step. Unless in the future, they can obtain power outside the life field. In addition to these, the rest of the pool is the same as the newly placed scroll, scattered in the corners of the ordinary artifacts. Some of them were bred by the concept of moon, and some were born by the source of change. They are still powerful in their own fields, but their power level is far inferior to the previous ones. As for the lower-level sub-artifacts, those products forged after birth will not appear in the spiritual world at this time. Any real artifact contains the corresponding original power. Even gods with powerful divine power will not ignore their existence. If I hadn't opened up the spiritual world, I wouldn't have been able to obtain so many artifacts at once. After all, only the world can directly use the source power to breed artifacts. However, our new god king is afraid to kill me minus. With a chuckle, Ryan looked at the embryos bred by the source power of time and space again, and then went directly back to the previous palace. The space-time mirror suspended in the air was empty. Just now, the Earth Mother and the Titans had returned to Mount Odysseus. Ryan did not continue to spy on their movements. After all, the battle was over and the 11th level divine power was not enough to prevent his spying from being discovered. But he knew without observation that the Titans went to the sacred mountain to celebrate, and perhaps there was some distribution of power. Although Kronos was the second-generation god king, he was also the generation of god king with the weakest divine power. Unlike Zeus, he did not have a group of descendants and lovers to consolidate the divine court for him. Unlike the Father of Heaven, he did not have the supreme divine power to suppress disobedience. Chaos under his rule will fall into an era of feudalization lasting tens of thousands of years. The Titans have the final say in their respective fields, and the third generation of gods will also be born during this period. Now because of Ryan, Kronos, who is depleted of his origin, is even less likely to do anything extra. If nothing unexpected happens, he will first be at ease as a Joe Emperor. At least 1,000 years later, he will try to do something. But he will send someone to find me, not only because of the 2 agreements, but also because he needs mortals to strengthen his kingship. If the gods cannot worship him, then it is also a good idea to let mortals who look like gods respect him as king. Besides, creation itself is the behavior that chaos prefers. After a silent smile, Ryan actually looked forward to creating life. The spiritual world is the world of spiritual life after all, and chaos is the destination of all living things. The seeds that give creatures souls, when the souls grow old and die, everything about it will return to the spiritual world. This is what Ryan wants, a way to continuously draw power from chaos and faith. Feeling the meager power coming from the spiritual life, Ryan looked a little strange. First, Kronos was chopped off, and now Zeus is also suffering. For this unexpected good thing, Ryan decisively said that you can come more if you can. Chapter 27 New Era. On Onal's mountain, everything was just as Ryan expected. The banquet at Kailash lasted for 3 months. Except for Cronus, even Mnemosyne put aside the unhappiness in her heart and enjoyed the long-lost free time. They left everything behind, and for the first time in their lives, they had no one to restrain them. It's a pity that there is no wine in the world at this time, so the gods can't get drunk. 3 months later, the banquet is coming to an end. As early as the first month had passed, the Earth Mother had hidden under the sacred mountain to recuperate her ravaged origin, so at this time only the Titan brothers were still having a banquet on the sacred mountain. But as time went by, the atmosphere became a little more subtle. It is undisputed that Cronus would become the God King. But the former God King regarded the gods as servants, which was unacceptable to the gods. Just because Uranus can do it doesn't mean Cronus can do it too. He did not have the power of the Heavenly Father, so the Titans could not help but have their own little thoughts. Especially Oceanus and Hyperion, one of them is the original eldest son and the other holds the powerful sun priesthood. Even if they cannot become God Kings, they still want to become kings in their own fields. Finally, in the delicate atmosphere, Oceanus was the first to get up. He looked at his former younger brother, now his brother. Because of his sudden behavior, the Titans all paid attention to him. Seeing this, Cronus remained calm, but his gloomy mood added a bit of panic. Now is no longer the time to fight before. The power that Rhea helped him borrow from the past has been lost, and the power of the God King has just been gathered. Now, his power is weaker than ever. If he fought with someone at this time, he would have to seek Rhea's help, but this would only further expose his problems. My brother, do you have anything to say to me? On such a celebratory day, I will give your request serious consideration. Cronus tried his best to act gentle and dignified. He didn't even call his former eldest brother younger brother. You are worrying too much, Cronus, I am not here to oppose you. The Lord of the Ocean shook his head. He could feel that something was wrong with Cronus' mood, but he didn't think that the other person was afraid of him. In his mind, Cronus just didn't want to openly confront him. After all, as the Lord of the Outer Sea and the river around the world, even if Cronus is stronger than him, as long as he hides in the sea, the other party can't do anything to him. But he had no intention of challenging Cronus' throne. After all, even if the other party can't do anything to him, the other Titans will never surrender to him. In fact, except for Rhea, who knew the inside story, the Titans had already recognized Cronus' power. But recognition is recognition. They are not willing to bow their knees in front of the new God King as they serve the Heavenly Father. You have proven your strength, Cronus, I am no match for you. He said, I just want to say goodbye to you. After all, I may rarely come here again. I want to return to the sea. That's where I should be. With that said, Oceanus waved to his sister. Thetis hesitated for a moment, but looking at her brother, she walked forward together. I'll leave Mount Odals to you. I'm going to be my uncle's neighbor. I wish you a speedy recovery, Mother Goddess. I also wish you eternal kingship, Cronus. After saying goodbye at last, Oceanus did not wait for a response, but picked up his sister and flew away from the sacred mountain. He was not afraid of Cronus becoming ruthless. He is not the father, and he does not have the power of one against many. If he dared to attack him, Oceanus believed that his brothers would not stand by and watch. Watching the Lord of the Ocean and the goddess of raw water leave, Cronus's expression was a little stiff, but it soon returned to normal. At least it's not the worst outcome. Even if there is no lack of origin, he actually doesn't expect his brothers to bow to him. After trying to calm down, Cronus was about to say something to lighten the atmosphere, but Thea and Hyperion stood up immediately, making it difficult for him to maintain his expression. After God Lord Ocean left, he had realized that he could not make these brothers surrender. So he was prepared to give in voluntarily, rather than being forced by the gods. But obviously, the sun god did not intend to give him this opportunity. Haha, my newly enthroned majesty, just like the eldest brother and eldest sister, we are also preparing to leave. After all, the sun is not as warm as the holy mountain. I still prefer it there. Hyperion couldn't help but feel a little happy when he looked at his former brother who looked a little ugly. You have tried all your best to deceive your father from the beginning, but so what? Even if you sit on the throne of God King, no one will really surrender to you. I think you won't force us to stay with you like my father once did. Hyperion said with a smile, as if he really respected the God King in front of him. That kind of cruel behavior is not what a God King should do. Of course, you are right. Cronus said coldly. Among the brothers, Hyperion has always been the most ambitious. Perhaps due to the influence of the priesthood, the son is born with a thirst for power. Then go back to your son since you like it there so much, just stay up there forever. Haha, of course. As the center of the starry sky, I should stay there. With a chuckle, Hyperion didn't take the God King's words seriously. The earth belongs to the mother goddess and the mountain god, the ocean belongs to the two sea gods, and the starry sky belongs to him. He was very curious. What was left of Kronos as the king of gods? Let's go, Thea. I wish you a speedy recovery, mother. I also wish you eternal kingship, my dear brother. The sun god left with the god of light and vision, and the sacred mountain suddenly became much emptier. Seeing this, the remaining titans looked at each other. They finally stood up one by one and said goodbye to Kronos. Phoebe and Kuz went to the sky together. As the gods of celestial bodies and light bodies, they will be neighbors with Hyperion and the others. Themis did not leave explicitly, but she said she wanted to go to the earth to take a walk. After all, she had been confined to the sacred mountain for too long. Mnemosyne still hated Ryan, and she wanted to try to visit Ms. Knight to find out what happened to Ryan. She didn't dare to go directly to the underworld to confirm. After all, she knew very well how weak her power was. In the end, only Rhea, Creus and Epidus stayed. The weather was unpredictable, so Creus stayed here and used the sacred mountain as a foothold. Rhea had always been close to Kronos under the influence of power, so she didn't plan to leave. As for Epidus, he simply felt that he was too weak, so he stayed on the sacred mountain. You are welcome to stay. I am not your father. You can do whatever you want here. With a forced smile, Kronos didn't care whether his frustration was noticed. Today's things have made him, the new king, lose face, but he had no way to deal with it. You just need time, Kronos. Rhea comforted her brother. When you fully control the power of the king of the gods, it will be different. I will be with you. Even if you are not as good as your father and mother, you can gradually establish your own kingship. Yes, you are right, Rhea. At least you have always been by my side. Feeling a little relieved, Kronos arranged accommodation for Creus and Epidus. When he was alone, he stood on the top of Mount Odyssia and looked down at the earth. Under the night sky, there were stars and the empty earth was silent. In any case, the old era had passed and the new era had arrived. At least, he was now the God King. Chapter 28 Themis. Since the change of the King of Gods and the exodus of the gods, 300 years have passed in a flash. During the 300 years, as if a shackle had been opened, the vision of the birth of gods flashed in the world more than once, and chaos's origin also expanded. On the sea, after the Father of Heaven fell asleep in the highest place, the Mother of the Earth and her two sons, the original sea god Pontus, gave birth to 5 children. They are Nereus, the friendliness of the sea; Thaumas, the wonder of the sea; Phorcys, the anger of the sea; Keto, the danger of the sea; Eurybia, the power of the sea. When the 5 sea gods were born, Pontus became much more active. He no longer sank alone in the seabed, but often swam in the near sea and occasionally stepped on land to meet the Mother of the Earth. In terms of power, because of the birth of his offspring, Pontus's priesthood was split in part. But with the birth of these gods, the concept of the sea was further expanded. Between the increase and decrease, the original sea god is still a powerful god with a power level of 17. Also in the sea, Oceanus, the god of the ocean, and Thetis, the goddess of the original water, also gave birth to a group of children. There are now hundreds of them, and most of the sons of the gods are river gods, collectively known as Potamus. The goddesses represent a stream, river, pool, lake or sea, or even underground water. Most of them are not real gods, but are regional gods of divine power level 0 like Christo created by Ryan. Although they are immortal like gods, their power is far less than that of true gods. Of course, there are true gods among the Oceanids called Oceanites. The most well-known ones at present are the eldest sister of the Oceanids, the goddess of oath, Styx, and her sister, the goddess of fame, Climene. From then on, the priesthood of oath was decentralized to the world and chaos no longer responded to the oath of the gods. However, correspondingly, the cost of swearing to the Styx River is much smaller than before. Unlike the bustle on the sea, on the earth and in the sky, apart from Uriah, the god of mountains, who gave rise to some unknown mountain gods, only the eldest daughter of Creus and Phoebe was born. Her name is Leto, the god of conservation and breastfeeding. Ryan paid some attention to this. After all, her future children will be famous in the future. But all this has nothing to do with the Lord of the spirit world. For 300 years, Ryan has been absorbing and digesting the original power day and night. The size of the spirit world has covered the entire underworld, and even began to spread to the ground. He thought that this boring day would continue for hundreds of years, but on this day, an unexpected visitor made Ryan stop his action. Through the projection of the underworld moon in the material world, Ryan clearly saw that the Titan god, the goddess of justice and law, Themis, was there. Reaching out and stroking the eyes, time and space fluctuated. Under Ryan's power, the past and the changing future kept flashing before his eyes. Soon, he knew the intention of Themis. "Lyanna, bring her to me," Ryan said softly. "As you command, Your Highness." Since leaving Mount Odysseus, Themis has been wandering on Earth for 300 years. Chaos in this world is very similar to the myth, but there are also many differences. Not to mention the ocean, the area of the Earth alone is more than 100 times larger than the Mediterranean Sea on Earth, but the environment in most places seems wild and dangerous. And with the rise of the origin of the world, the area of chaos is also continuing to increase. By the time of Zeus, no one knows how vast the Earth will be. However, although the world is bigger, there are many problems that come with it. In the process of Themis measuring the Earth with her legs, she has discovered various places where the laws are disordered more than once. The world should be orderly, but in those special places, the rules of all things are reversed. Water flowing from low to high once stepped into the looping space that will keep circling, the cold fire that makes people feel cold. As the god of justice and law, Themis can hardly tolerate their existence. She had tried to correct them with the power of law, and the result was gratifying. She did get the disordered rules back on track. But as time went on, the goddess found that she was just doing useless work. This phenomenon of disordered laws is a manifestation of the original chaos of the world's rules and a loophole left over from the beginning of creation. They are born and die every moment. No matter how many she eliminates, there will always be the next one waiting for her. As long as the source of chaos remains in the laws of the world, this situation cannot be stopped. I need to create a code. I want to write the correct order on it and let the world see what I want to say, so that the laws of the world will solve these problems by themselves. After getting inspiration from the priesthood, Themis went to see the Earth Mother. She heard that Gaia had 3 magical stone tablets, which existed at the beginning of chaos creation. But unfortunately, the Earth Mother told her that thousands of years ago, the Oracle Stone tablets were handed over to the current spiritual god as a bet. So in order to complete her idea, Themis came to the underworld where Ryan last appeared. However, in the next 6 months, Themis searched the underworld, but still could not find any trace of Ryan. There was only the dark moon in the sky, which seemed to be his former creation. Finally, she came to the dark moon, hoping that its owner could hear her request. "Your Highness Ryan, I come to visit you, and I hope you can meet me." Standing in front of the dark moon, Themis said helplessly. But the next moment, Themis retreated instantly, looking ahead vigilantly. A ripple flashed across the space, and the spiritual breath permeated out. The black-robed girl with wings on her back appeared silently in front of Themis. Before that, she had not noticed her existence at all. She had never seen her before, but there was no doubt that this strange existence exuded the breath of the dark moon. And the most important thing was that in Themis's perception, the other party was obviously a true god, but she had never felt the fluctuations of the other party's birth. "Ms. Themis," the strange god spoke. Although the goddess of justice did not know the other party was obviously very familiar with her. "I came at your request to meet, Madam, my lord invites you." "Lord?" Themis was a little surprised. She came to visit the god of spirituality, but the goddess in front of her called Ryan the master? Even if he was the former father of heaven, although he actually enslaved the gods, he never let them call themselves slaves. Because they were both gods recognized by heaven and earth, the embodiment of chaos's law, belittling the other party was equivalent to belittling oneself. "Please follow me." Without answering the goddess of justice's doubts, Lyanna turned around, and a transparent portal appeared in front of the two. Frowning slightly, Themis did not back down. As an immortal god, only Tartarus could trap chaos now. Obviously, she did not think that the strange space in front of her had the power comparable to the abyss. Although she was not sure, Themis guessed that the unknown space in front of her and the goddess who claimed to be a servant were probably the sequel to the world's wrath on that day 300 years ago. Perhaps soon, she would know the reason for everything. Chapter 29, Goddess of Justice's Spiritual World Experience. "How should I address you, Goddess of the Dark Moon?" After following the black-robed girl through the door, Themis did not look around, but asked the name of the strange god. In Chaos's narrow circle of gods, a god she had never seen before suddenly appeared, which inevitably made her curious. "The Lord named me Lyanna." The girl's voice was very soft, but it gave people a sense of majesty. Themis knew that this was the influence of the Dark Moon priesthood. In today's underworld, apart from the recently appeared goddess of oath Styx, there are only a few descendants of the Dark Night gods who occasionally appear in the world. But Styx was just born, and the 6 children of the Dark Lord who controlled doom, destruction, decay, sorrow, deception, and lust were not strong. In a vague way, the Dark Moon was the ruler of the underworld. Even in later generations, the original Dark Moon and the Forked Road goddess became the sub-kings of the underworld with authority second only to Hades. It can be seen that the status of Underworld Moon in the underworld is extraordinary. Therefore, under the influence of the priesthood, Lyanna's voice naturally carries a hint of the king's feeling, just like the ocean god who now controls the sea. Hearing this, Themis nodded, but she stopped again after just a few steps. Hearing that there was no movement behind her, Lyanna in front turned around and asked Lady Justice with her eyes why she stopped. "I'm really sorry, just your highness Lyanna, what is this?" Just now, she was busy asking Lyanna's name, but when Themis looked around, she was surprised to find that she had come to a special place. Everything around seemed to be no different from the underworld outside. If it hadn't suddenly turned into a black and white world, Themis would have thought that she had never moved. Looking around, there was a kind of transparent creature shaped like a cover floating in the air around. They were floating, and many tentacles floated out from under the umbrella, as if they were absorbing something from the environment. Themis could feel that it might be the power called spirituality. Although she had never seen it before, the goddess was very sure that the strange-looking thing in front of her was indeed a kind of life, a life different from the gods. They had no divinity, and time alone could leave traces on them, or even erase their existence. But there was no doubt that this wonderful life that she had seen for the first time also had thoughts, although they were still very shallow. This was what made it most difficult for her to understand. At this moment, Chaos did not have any non-god intelligent life even if it was just primitive wisdom. This is a kind of ghost jellyfish, the weakest wandering soul jellyfish. Lyanna smiled slightly and explained aloud. In the first spiritual world, illusionary spirit world, they are at the bottom of the food chain, but they are also easy to reproduce. Look minus. Following the direction of Lyanna's finger, Themis noticed that there was a large transparent creature not far away, and it was cracking from the middle. The cracking process was very slow, lasting about 10 minutes. When the last strand of adhesion broke, the transparent creature was completely split into 2. Then, from the wounds of the 2 halves, a large number of transparent threads emerged from the body, forming the missing half of the body. The size of the 2 halves became smaller, but as time went on, they grew the missing parts and became 2 smaller complete lives. The Lord said that this is mitosis. Lyanna introduced seriously, this is a primitive and efficient way of reproduction. If the spiritual concentration is sufficient, they can double in half a day. The officials are divided. The new term refreshed Themis's worldview. As the Lord of Justice and Law, she has always been taciturn with a serious face and not moved by external things. But today, she was really surprised by what she saw and heard. It is mitosis. Lyanna corrected, didn't you see the spiritual threads that emerged when they derived the body? The goddess of justice remained silent, and she didn't know what to say. Let's go. Seeing that Themis had no questions, Lyanna waved her hand, and another light gate appeared in front of her. Themis could clearly feel that the power called spirituality by the other party was extremely strong behind the light gate, more than 10 times stronger than the first level of the spirit world where she was at this time. This is the gateway to the second level of the spirit world, the spiritual world, also known as the true spirit world. Originally, only a few places in each level of the spirit world are interconnected, but the barriers between the first 3 levels of the spirit world are deliberately set to be easier to break through. In addition, you are an invited guest, so we will take the fast track directly. Following Lyanna through the light gate again, Themis was about to express her understanding. The next moment, she was shocked by the scene in front of her again. In the first level of the spirit world, although everything was black and white, and although she encountered the strange wandering soul jellyfish and mitosis as soon as she entered, these were still within the scope of Themis' understanding. It was nothing more than a special creation. I heard that the spiritual god Guandimu borrowed the life bottle, and it was not strange to give birth to new life other than plants. But what appeared in front of Themis at this time was a scene she had never seen before. 2 silvery crescent moons hung in the sky, and many kinds of winged creatures were flying and chasing each other in the sky. The earth was covered with all kinds of strange plants that exuded spiritual breath, and at least 10 kinds of new creatures with fur or phosphorus armor were walking on the ground. Not far away, about a kilometer away, there stood a small lake. Many scaly creatures swam in it, And at the bottom of the lake, there was a strange creature that kept opening and closing, but with a pearl in the middle. Are these all the creations of His Highness Ryan? Looking at everything in front of her, Lady Justice asked in disbelief. Before, when Mother Earth created plants, she had already thought it was a groundbreaking feat, but today, seeing these special creatures, she suddenly felt the desolation of chaos. Yes. The Lord created the world in 7 days, and these were all spiritual creatures created by the Lord in 5 or 6 days. Very satisfied with the shock of this outside God to the power of the Creator, Lyanna explained with a smile. After a moment of silence, Themis immediately said, "Can I get closer to see them?" "Of course, but minus." With a light wave of her right hand, Lyanna summoned a light gate for the 3rd time. This time, Themis did not feel any breath from behind the door. "It seems that you plan to stay here for a while, so we can't go up one level at a time. I'll wait for you here. In a while, we will go directly to the 7th spiritual world, the Lord's palace. When the time comes, you can tell the Lord the purpose of your visit." Just then she remembered that she was actually here to borrow the oracle tablet, but Themis hesitated for a moment and walked towards the spiritual beings. She was very interested in such a strange non-god life with its own thinking. Lyanna's name is actually adapted from Diana, which comes from Latin and translates to the sacred moon goddess. However, Princess Diana is more famous, so in order to prevent confusion, it was changed to Lyanna. The same is true for Esther. In Hebrew, this means star. Chapter 30 Palace and Wine. Half a day later. Somewhat unsatisfied, Themis returned to where Lyanna was. She had kept the owner here waiting for too long. Although strictly speaking, Chaos did not have perfect etiquette at the moment, she still felt that it was not a good idea to do so. "What did you get?" Lyanna asked with a smile. It was an eye-opener. In half a day, Themis walked through the surrounding thousands of miles of land and saw thousands of strange spiritual lives. Some of them feed on plants, some feed on other lives, and some feed on some concepts, which the goddess had never seen before. In comparison, her weird brothers were not so strange. During the observation, Themis tried to stop the fight between different lives, but then she gradually understood. Mortals and gods are different. Food is a pleasure for the gods, but it is a necessity for them. The goddess saw more than once that the spiritual lives fought each other for food, and she also witnessed the unique fighting methods of the spiritual lives. Their power is very weak, but their fighting skills are primitive and fierce. Unlike the gods who use authority and divine power to fight, the spirit world creatures also know how to test, trap and disguise. When I go back, I will mention this to Kronos. The Mother Goddess and His Highness Ryan have another 700 years to fulfill their agreement. When the life Aquarius returns to the Mother Goddess as agreed, we should also borrow this artifact to create life on Earth. Following Lyanna through the light gate, Themis made a decision in her heart. Compared with the empty and lonely world of chaos now, the spirit world gives her a more vibrant feeling. After passing through the illusory portal, the next moment, the breath of source power that came to her face instantly stopped Themis thinking. Looking around, the goddess found herself on a bottomless mountain. 7 crescent moons hung in the sky, and 6 layers of virtual and real interfaces were pierced by the mountain. Standing on the mountain, although she couldn't see the specific appearance of those interfaces, Themis still had a feeling of stepping on the world under her feet. Sinea, or Nairis, is the name of the sacred mountain, which means the beginning of the moon and the source of spirituality. When she climbed here, the goddess instantly understood this information. And in the dark, she felt that there was a kind of power very similar to the origin of her priesthood, swallowing and flowing in the sacred mountain, and slowly changing its nature. If this is all opened up by His Highness Ryan, it is really a great feat. Taking a deep breath, the goddess of justice exclaimed sincerely. Opening up the interface and creating living beings. At least with Themis's divine power, she didn't know how to achieve it. Of course it is a great feat, on the side, Lyanna said as a matter of course. The name of the Lord has not yet spread in the world now, but one day, they will know the supreme power of the Lord. With a polite smile, although she was shocked by the scene in front of her, Themis still felt that this was due to the special authority. The gods are absolute in their respective fields, just like the goddess of agriculture in later generations can make all things stop growing, but if there is no corresponding authority, even an existence like Uranus cannot change this result simply by force. Themis didn't know what kind of priesthood spirituality was, but everything in front of her was probably the embodiment of the absoluteness of this priesthood. Following Lyanna, she continued to move forward. There were steps paved with unknown materials under her feet, and all kinds of strange man-made objects on both sides of the road made the goddess dazzled. The location opposite the light gate was not the top of the mountain, but a slightly lower part. After all, although it could be done, Lyanna would not open the door directly to Lion's palace. However, Themis did not feel that she was despised. On the contrary, she was still interested in observing the surrounding landscape. Everything in front of her was a new and strange scenery she had seen for the first time. This more civilized product naturally matched the higher position of the law priesthood and the order priesthood. Themis had made a decision that she would do the same on Mount Odysseus. Time passed slowly. Although flying was prohibited on Mount Sinai, the two were not far from the top of the mountain. So soon, Themis arrived in front of the palace under the guidance of Lyanna. The magnificent man-made objects that had never been seen before once again made Themis' eyes light up. Compared with the tents of the gods of chaos at this time, this kind of creation that looked very orderly and civilized was undoubtedly very pleasing to the goddess. The buildings were not dense, and each one had a different style and beauty. Although Themis could only see a few nearby ones, she still wrote down their styles one by one. This is where the gods should live. The goddess thought secretly. This is it, the Temple of Lopers, where the host welcomes guests. Pointing to the magnificent hall in front of her, Lyanna smiled slightly, and then said goodbye. I have completed the work of leading the way. Next, it is your meeting with the Lord. Unexpectedly, Lyanna was about to leave when she reached the door. Themis was about to keep her, but she saw the black-robed goddess smiled at her and then took a step back gently. With one step, she disappeared without a trace, just as she appeared at the beginning. But this time Themis saw some clues. The other party's movement seemed to be using the power of time and space in the spirit world, and came to a different level of the spirit world in an instant. Even if she didn't move when there was a world between the two, she naturally couldn't detect the other party's existence. Seeing this, Themis couldn't help but think of the first spiritual world, the illusionary spirit world, which was exactly the same as the underworld. Perhaps before, Lyanna had actually been standing beside her, standing in the underworld moon, but she was unaware of it because she couldn't see through the barrier between reality and the spiritual world. Can Kronos do this level of space-time power? After a little contemplation, Themis shook her head. She didn't think about it, but walked towards the hall in front of her. Since she had already arrived at the door, it would be bad to let the owner wait any longer. Moreover, for the goddess who also wanted to build a palace, the furnishings inside the palace were also worth learning. Crossing the threshold, the eyes suddenly lit up. Compared with the light of the crescent moon, the palace seemed brighter. Looking up, there were tables, lamps, utensils, decorations, and the black-clothed gods who were getting up from the main seat. Although Themis didn't know what civilization was, she felt that everything she saw made her like it more than what she had experienced in the past. Welcome, ma'am. Raising his cup, Ryan smiled and said to the goddess of justice who was walking up. Before we talk about business, please enjoy the dinner I prepared for you. Thank you for your hospitality, Your Highness Ryan. Raising her eyebrows, Themis took the cup and drank the red liquid. This is wine. The liquid seemed to contain memory, and when she drank it, Themis knew its name. For her, it was just a good drink. But the goddess believed that her brothers would definitely love this creation. Putting down the cup, Themis stepped forward and took a seat. She was also looking forward to the upcoming dinner. Chapter 31 Code. What an unforgettable experience. In the Temple of Lopez, Themis took the last sip of wine, and her fair cheeks turned a little red. Ordinary drinks are not enough to affect the gods, but obviously those brewed by Ryan using the authority of wine are not among them. If you are interested in it, you can take some back. Putting down the crystal-clear wine glass, Ryan waved over dozens of barrels of brewed wine. Since we last said goodbye, Cronus and I may not have seen each other for a long time. These drinks are my belated gift to congratulate him on becoming the God King. I think he will like it. Then I will accept it for Cronus. Smiling apologetically, Themis didn't know about the grudge between Ryan and Cronus regarding the origin of time and space. She also thought that Ryan wanted to use this to remind Cronus not to forget their two previous agreements. In fact, the goddess of justice was also a little dissatisfied with her brother's delay in fulfilling his contract. In the past 300 years, she had passed by Mount Odal several times and visited the Earth Mother who had regained some of her vitality. From the mouth of the Mother Goddess, she heard that Cronus had refused to go to the abyss and release his 6 weird-looking brothers on the grounds that he had not yet fully controlled the authority of the God King. Mother Earth was very angry about this, but she was not the king of gods after all, so she didn't know whether Cronus refused on purpose, or whether he was really far from the power Uranus once had. For this reason, Earth Mother left Mount Odals and lived on the mainland near the Eastern Ocean all year round, staying with her second son. The 5 ocean gods who came to the world one after another were born during this period of time. Dear His Highness Ryan, thank you again for the dinner. But this time, I have something to ask for. After straightening her expression, Lady Justice, who had taken off her blindfold ribbon 300 years ago, looked directly at Ryan and said straight to the point. Smiling slightly, although it was already settled, Ryan still pretended not to know. Please tell me, madam. I'm also curious about what made you choose to come to my door after 300 years of travel. Hearing this, Themis's heart moved. Although he did not hide his traces, it was obvious that Ryan had an unknown way of observing the earth. However, the goddess of justice did not care about this. She directly stated her purpose. In the past 300 years, I have traveled to many places. In the present world of chaos, I found that the chaos and madness left over from the beginning of creation did not flow into Tartarus, but still existed in the laws. Inside, I sought a solution, and in the end, the priesthood of the law gave me a response. I need to formulate laws for the rules of this world, so that the laws themselves can exclude chaos and madness. But what does this have to do with me? Ryan asked with a smile. Because I still need a piece of creation that can carry the laws. I want to use it to communicate with the world and write my laws into the roots of the world. Themis looked solemn, she could feel that. Her promotion to the priesthood should be based on this matter. As long as she can perfect the present world, the priesthood of the law will rise, enough to support her to become a powerful god with a divine power level of 18 or above. I visited the mother goddess and asked her for the oracle tablet, a mysterious creation that was born at the beginning of creation. But the mother goddess told me that it came to you as a bet thousands of years ago. I am taking the liberty to pay you a visit because I hope to borrow this artifact from you. With that said, Themis looked at Ryan. Yes, Ryan nodded as he met the goddess's gaze. It's in my hand. But now, it's no longer an oracle. He raised his hand slightly, and the next moment, with a burst of space fluctuations, a huge copper book appeared out of thin air in his hand. Without any cover-up, the powerful aura of the code of creation was instantly sensed by Themis. There is no doubt that this is a terrifying high-level artifact, and it even gives her a vague feeling of a higher level. It's different from what Mother Earth knows, Ms. Themis. Brushing the spine of the brass book with his right hand, Ryan said calmly, the nature of the oracle tablet is beyond her imagination, and the order contained in it is even close to most of Tartarus chaos. I made 3 artifacts from 3 stone slabs, and what you see is the second one. Frowning her brows, Themis knew that she would probably fail. The aura of the artifact in front of me is comparable to the Aquarius of life. No one would lend such an artifact out easily. But out of a desire to perfect her priesthood, she spoke anyway. If you wish, she said, I wonder what I would have to pay to borrow this artifact from you. She was ready to make a vow to do things for Ryan in the future. In fact, she had nothing else to give. But to her surprise, she got an unexpected answer from Ryan. Nothing is needed. He said, as long as you swear an oath to the spirit world and recognize my undisputed sovereignty over the creation code, then it will be yours for the next 1,000 years. Seeing the astonishment of the goddess in front of him, Ryan did not explain, but just handed over the book that seemed to be made of brass. He believed that the other party would not refuse. A little surprised, but just as Ryan thought, looking at the artifact handed to her, Themis hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took it. Gods and priests influence each other. Faced with the temptation of promotion to the priesthood, Themis could not refuse. Finally, we chatted for a few more words, and soon, with the borrowed artifact, the goddess of justice left the sacred mountain. After Ryan sent Themis away from the spirit world, he also went to a palace behind Mount Sinai. That was his bedroom, the Temple of Eras. Sitting on the soft couch, Ryan looked through the space-time mirror and watched Themis walk towards the ground with doubts and confusion. He knew that the other party was going to seek the order of the God King. To legislate for the present world, the approval of the God King is also an indispensable part. After the legislation, this artifact is considered to be initially perfected. After looking at the stone book held by the goddess in the mirror, Ryan whispered to himself. In his original plan, the code of creation should be the recorder, perfecter, and creator of all the rules and laws of the world, and the law can indeed be linked to spirituality, which is feasible. But the problem is that the goddess of law had already come to the world long before Ryan opened up the spirit world. Ryan can absorb the star origin of the world, and he has almost absorbed it, but that is because the real star God has not yet been born, and Kuz is only the god of the lightless celestial body, but the law is different. The previous code of creation was completely powerful because of the order origin of the oracle slate itself. The part of it that belongs to law is only a very small part from time sequence. But as Timus legislates for the present world, the origin of chaos law will rise a lot, half of which will flow to the code of creation that carries it, and Timus will only get the other half. After this incident, this powerful creation that is close to the artifact of creation when taken out alone is considered to be completely mature. And the chaos and madness that were expelled by the law after the creation of the code. Power is not good or bad, the important thing is to use it in the right place. Watching Timus coming to the surface and heading towards Mount Odalus, Ryan dispersed the space-time mirror. He can silently observe Timus, who is at the 13th level of divine power, but that doesn't mean he can observe the God King who is gradually taking his place. He doesn't need to worry about what happens next. For her own promotion, Lady Justice will go all out to complete all matters related to legislation. His mind sinks into the roots of the spiritual world and Ryan continues to digest different origins. This will be his main job for a long time in the future. Chapter 32 Hiding from Each Other. On Mount Odalus. After obtaining the code of creation from Ryan, Timus rushed towards the sacred mountain non-stop. Legislating for the world cannot be accomplished casually. A suitable priesthood, a sufficiently powerful carrier, and the authority of the God King, the custodian of the world, are all indispensable. However, Timus was not worried about her brother rejecting her request. After all, the power and position of the God King was not constant. Like Cronus, not to mention that the 500 years have not yet reached the time limit. Even if it does, his power as a God King will definitely not be comparable to that of his father. Despite Uranus's rebellious behavior, the fact that he created life through sexual intercourse is his greatest achievement as a God King. What's more, Cronus is still a usurper and the divine power he obtains will only be lower. Now that he can complete the task of legislation under his own rule, this new God King absolutely desires it. 3 days later, Timus, who finally returned to the sacred mountain, immediately found her brother and told him her thoughts in detail. However, contrary to the expectations of the goddess of justice, although Cronus supported her legislation, he seemed to be more interested in the spiritual god. So you are saying that not only did he not make any demands of you, but he also promised to deal with the chaos and madness excluded by the law for you. Yes. I thought they would gather on the earth and form many dangerous Jedi. After all, I couldn't handle them. But since His Highness Ryan is interested in them, I agreed to hand them over to him. Some were confused as to what Cronus was focusing on, but Timus still answered. She guessed what Ryan must be up to, but she didn't care. It's just something she won't need, and keeping it will only cause trouble for herself. But Timus could see clearly that Cronus didn't think so. His resentment towards Ryan lasted for more than a day or two. Things are not that simple. There must be something you don't know. Ryan will definitely gain something in this process. He is not that kind of person. With a cold snort, Cronus looked a little unhappy. 300 years have passed. Although the power brought by his own priesthood is negligible, the power of the God King, that has been condensed for the most part, still gives him a powerful power of level 17. But even so, every time he thought of his lost origin, Cronus deeply regretted the decision he had made. The level of divine power is the level of divine power and the actual combat power is the actual combat power. Without most of the time and space priests, Cronus's strength is not as good as before, even if his divine power level is the same. What's more, if the time and space priesthood is still complete, his current divine power can be one level higher. In the field of powerful divine power, the gap between levels is not comparable to those with medium divine power. On the other side, looking at Cronus's expression, Timus clearly had some misunderstanding. She thought the other party was angry with Ryan's prediction. But the goddess of justice would not act out of anger, so she reminded. I know, Cronus. Because of His Highness Ryan's prophecy, you and my brothers are dissatisfied with him. But you have to know that, at least for you, you not only took the initiative to ask for the prophecy from him, but you also owe him 2 requests. You swore to the world that you would complete them. When you fully inherit the throne of God King in 200 years, you can no longer delay it. Cronus was speechless. He once again scolded chaos rigid instinct in his heart. It is obvious that the spiritual God has done something that makes the world dissatisfied, and it is obvious that the other party has usurped his origin, but to the world, it is always right to do things right and not people. Even if it instinctively resents Ryan for stealing his power, it will not give up its pledge to Cronus because of this. I will, but there are still 200 years, right? In the end, Cronus accepted the fact that he had to do things for Ryan, and he turned to ask another question. You said he opened up an interface called Spirit World, and there are many special creatures in it? Yes. Timus nodded and said, I was just about to tell you. After he returns the life vase, I plan to visit the Mother Goddess and create some new life on the earth. Speaking of new lives, I've seen some. Cronus frowned slightly and recalled, about 100 years ago, Ker, the god of destruction, came to the holy mountain to meet me on behalf of their 8 gods who have always lived in the underworld. At that time, he was surrounded by some beings called eternal night nymphs. They were not gods, or even powerful gods. According to him, they were the mother of night, given to him by the ancient god Nyx. Waiter. Cronus actually glorified this process. Ker's purpose was not to represent the 8 gods in meeting the god king at all, but simply to show off in front of his new god king. In fact, most of the gods of chaos are still very emotional. The god king was still alone, but he was accompanied by his attendants. This greatly satisfied Ker's vanity and made Cronus secretly angry. But he had no choice. After all, according to Ker, he had a close relationship with his mother goddess, and the new god king would not dare to provoke a primitive god at this time. Of course, what Cronus didn't know was that the god of destruction also beautified the process of obtaining the night nymph. In his words, the 2 primitive ancient gods cared about them very much, but in fact, the 2 gods of the dark night had never met them. Erebus didn't care about his children who evolved from his original body. Lady Night only gave them a few nymphs she created with her soul embryos for the sake of name. Among them, none of them were endowed with divinity by Lady Night and enlightened into demigods. It was not like what Kier said, that they were witnesses of the closeness between mother and son. Didn't the Night Mother go to His Highness Ryan before? Tima speculated. Maybe it was at that time that he and His Highness Nyx created new life together. Maybe, Kronos said, but since His Highness Nyx has accepted the existence of new life, I think there should be no problem with them. When the time comes, I will go to see the Mother Goddess with you. On the land of chaos, there should be some life that knows how to respect the God King. Timus frowned slightly, a little dissatisfied. Ryan created life in his own interface, and Kronos' first reaction was they might have problems. At least in her impression, Ryan didn't seem to have taken the initiative to do anything to the Titans. You don't understand. Shaking his head, Kronos looked at the face of the goddess of justice, and finally said nothing more. He didn't spread his wrong ideas all over the world. If possible, he hoped that no one would know the deficiency of the origin of his priesthood. Let's do it this way for now, Timus. When you finish the creation of the code, I will probably have taken control of the throne of the King of Gods. At that time, I will support your actions in the name of the King of Gods. That's the best. Nodding, the goddess of justice still didn't tell Kronos about Ryan in depth. For her, legislation is the top priority at the moment. The previous 300 years were far from enough for her to understand all the loopholes in the laws of the world. Now, with the help of the Code of Creation, she can get in touch with the rules of the world more deeply. Chapter 33 Metis. Since Timus left the sacred mountain, another 500 years have passed. Chaos time is so worthless even after the first generation of humans appeared. At least until the age of bronze humans, the gods got used to calculating time in years instead of hundreds of years. 300 years ago, on Mount Odylus, Kronos truly became the king of gods. Driven by the oath, he announced the new rules of the sun and the moon in the name of the king of gods, and the few remaining concepts related to the moon completely flowed into the spiritual world. Not surprisingly, the future moon goddess will have nothing to control except a huge celestial body that belongs to her and can emit light. Even the light emitted by the moon, except for the name moonlight, has nothing to do with any mystical meaning. Regarding the second oath, Kronos also announced Ryan's sovereignty over the elements and the qualification to weave the web to control them. The power of the elements therefore flows to the spiritual world, but except for the fire element, the other elements are more superficial. Although there is no wind god yet, wind is subordinate to meteorology, water, earth, light, darkness, etc. Also have their own corresponding gods, only fire does not have one. So if nothing unexpected happens, There will be a fire god who cannot control the fire element in the future. And as Ryan fully accommodates the source power of fire element, he can further touch the real fire and take this ownerless natural priesthood into his hands. Maybe in the future, when the eldest daughter of the God King is born, Chaos will still give birth to the god of fire, but she will be just a god who simply controls the burning of matter. From then on, the fire of the spirit can harm matter, but the fire of matter cannot touch the spirit. Therefore, within the scope of spirituality, Ryan defines fire as the first one. In addition, Chaos has also seen many divine births in the past 500 years. The most well-known of them is Helios, the eldest son of Hyperion, the original sun god. When this new god was born, the whole world could see the sun that became thousands of times brighter. The original sun priesthood was divided into two, the larger one returned to the Titan ancient god, and the smaller one to his child. Hyperion still represents the sun, but his eldest son represents the trajectory of the sun. The original Chaos world did not have sunrise and sunset, but now, there are dusk and dawn. With the division of the priesthood, Hyperion, who was already close to the 18th level of divine power, was also seriously injured and could only barely maintain the level of powerful divine power. But divine power can be maintained, priesthood can be divided, but the sun cannot be divided into two. So Helios became a sun god without the sun as soon as he was born. Without the celestial body corresponding to the priesthood, Helios still maintains the appearance of a child even though he has been born for nearly 100 years. With only the 15th level of the sun priesthood, he is just a weak true god with weak divine power like Ryan at the beginning. This family drama of the ancient Titan gods has made the gods of chaos laugh. In addition, the second daughter of Caius and Phoebe, the meteor goddess Asteria, was born. There is an unpredictable celestial body in the sky of chaos. But what surprised Caius was that his daughter only represented the celestial body itself. The light she emitted did not even contain the slightest energy, and she was obviously also a star. Excluding the episodes in the sky, there were many gods born in the sea. Especially Oceanus, he was very interested in having children. Hundreds of gods and goddesses were born, and there were many more rivers, lakes and springs on the earth, and the power of the Lord of the Ocean began to expand. Although as the river of the world, Oceanus actually controls the open sea and ocean currents. But as his children became more and more, friction began to arise between him and the ancient sea god. The priesthood of the gods cannot be taken away, but this does not mean that those with similar priesthoods will not fight. Just as the earth has been expanding, the ocean is actually getting bigger. The enlarged ocean has no innate ownership. Although the two sea gods divided these seas equally before, it does not mean that they will always be like this. The two sea masters did not take action directly, but there were many conflicts between their children. What made the Ocean Lord unhappy was that although he had many offspring, there were only two true gods, and Styx still lived in the underworld and never came to serve his father. He had no choice but to continue to have children with the original water goddess Thetis. In such an environment, the wise Metis in later mythology, now the god of hydrology, was born. Congratulations, my brother, another true god, your pantheon is getting stronger. In a palace in the distant sea, the god of weather congratulated his brother whom he had not seen for a long time. Since Themis built her temple on Mount Odysseus, soon, palaces of all sizes were spread all over chaos. At least in terms of enjoyment, the gods of chaos learned very quickly. You're going to be born soon, aren't you? Caius, I heard that you and Eurybia are together. According to the date, your first child will be born soon. With a mild smile, Oceanus seemed not very enthusiastic. On the side, Caius looked a little embarrassed. He knew very well that Oceanus was expressing his dissatisfaction with him. After all, everyone now knew that the Ocean Lord had a conflict with his uncle. Although neither of them took direct action, the two sides had not had any contact for hundreds of years. At this time, Caius chose the youngest daughter of the ancient sea god, which naturally made him very dissatisfied. I know there was a conflict between you and Pontus. Caius was a little helpless, but there is no need for you to fight. So which side are you on? Ignoring the polite words of the weather god, Oceanus asked bluntly. I will stay on Mount Odysseus. I don't want to fight with Eurybia's relatives, but I won't fight with you either. Although he said this, Caius knew very well that it would not be a good thing for him to stand on any side, for he had not yet become a powerful god. It's better, my brother. Giving a warning look to Caius, Oceanus turned around and looked at the gods who came to the banquet, and announced loudly. To celebrate the birth of my daughter, the hydrological god Metis, let's start celebrating. Everyone here is a friend of the ocean god system. As the voice fell, the atmosphere on the field, which was slightly stiff due to the two titans, finally became cheerful. The gods said blessings and began to enjoy the wine at the banquet. Once this drink from the sacred mountain appeared, it became the favorite of the gods. No banquet could be without it. There are rumors that they actually originated from a god in the underworld, but no one cares about its source. The gods only care about one thing, that is, wine can make them enjoy it, that's enough. In front of the palace, the gods were celebrating, but in the place they didn't see in the spiritual world, a figure disappeared silently to the back of the ocean temple. When the spiritual world began to spread to the ground, Ryan did not choose the continent first, but chose the more remote ocean. At this time, he stood in the first level of the spiritual world, looking at the young baby on the bed outside with a hesitant look. She was Metis, who was originally in charge of strategy, wisdom, thought, and hydrology, the first wife of the third generation of god King Zeus, and the mother of the goddess Athena. But now, she is just a weak baby in charge of hydrology. Chapter 34, Move. Unlike the offspring of the original gods, the offspring of the second generation of gods need to grow. They are no longer like their fathers, who can grow up in just half a day after birth. Their growth rates are different, ranging from a few months to an uncertain period. At the same time, the new gods no longer have strong divine power. When the Titans were born, they had at least the power of weak divine power, but most of these new gods, except for a few, grew up slowly from divine power level 1. Now, Metis in front of Ryan is like this. Her newborn skin is as smooth as milk and her pair of black and bright eyes do not look like she was just born. But there is no doubt that it will take at least decades for her to become an adult god. This is not only because the third generation of gods should be like this, but also because her origin is not strong. When she was born, wisdom, thought, strategy were automatically scattered in the world like memory in the past, leaving her with only water text. But unlike Mnemosyne, the three generations of gods were not born with knowledge, so she would not realize that she should have these powers. Metis Athena. Maybe I should take her away. Whispering softly, Ryan was not worried about being discovered. Oceanus and Theseus were indeed very strong, but as long as he did not appear beside them, it would be difficult for the other party to find him. This is the absoluteness of theocracy. When Ryan hid in history and had the spiritual world as a cover, no one would find his existence even if there was only one hall between them. Forget it. Although fate has been changed, before Zeus ascends the throne, I still hope that this world will be a little more familiar. And in the original trajectory, this goddess of wisdom doesn't seem to be that smart. Shaking his head, Ryan finally gave up his plan. With Metis's potential, if he takes her back to the spiritual world and cultivates her carefully, she will be able to carry some powerful priesthoods. For example, knowledge, its origin is flowing to the spiritual world every moment. Originally, the existence of the god of words could isolate Ryan from absorbing knowledge to a certain extent, but unfortunately, the oracle slate has a more orthodox source of words. In this case, if there is one more candidate for the priesthood, it will not only speed up the absorption of the spiritual world, but also bring Ryan a powerful subordinate in the future. But in the end, he gave up the idea. A goddess of wisdom, but she can't even understand her own safety. What is the difference between this so-called wisdom and Prometheus's foresight? In comparison, perhaps her daughter is more suitable to be the spokesperson for wisdom. Since the decision has been made, Ryan stretched out his hand and three multifaceted crystals appeared in front of him silently. The spiritual world has just begun to absorb the origins of the three major priesthoods, but it does not affect Ryan's condensation of their corresponding priesthoods. Although they are still very weak now as the spiritual world absorbs all the scattered origins, they will return to their due height. With a finger, 3 crystals fell into the body of the baby girl in front of him. At the same time, Ryan's figure disappeared in an instant. The next moment, the Lord of the Ocean appeared directly beside the bed. He looked around, but found nothing. The moment Ryan bestowed the priesthood, he returned from history to the present. Oceanus immediately noticed something strange, but he could not track Ryan's existence. What's wrong? After a while, Theseus also appeared here. The goddess was not in the temple before, but she quickly rushed back after sensing the divine power that her husband burst out in an instant. Nothing, maybe my illusion. Shaking his head, Oceanus was ready to go back. But when his eyes swept over his daughter, his eyes suddenly stopped. Is this the breath of the priesthood of wisdom? Somewhat uncertain, Oceanus picked up his daughter and carefully sensed the breath in her body. But soon, he not only confirmed his previous induction, but also discovered strategy and thought. Metis was given other priesthoods by the world? Did you sense Chaos's breath just now? Thesis also noticed her daughter's abnormality. But Chaos had never given away priesthoods other than those of a god, and she instinctively thought it was a gift from the world. Maybe, but it doesn't matter anymore. The Ocean Lord was not sure, but he was indeed very surprised. Unlike Pontus's eugenics, he was synonymous with casting a wide net. Among all his children, only Styx had a priesthood that allowed her to reach medium divine power. The remaining Climon and Metis, fame and hydrology made it difficult for them to even become weak divine powers. But now, with wisdom, strategy and thoughts, Metis is destined to become a powerful existence like her eldest sister. At least medium divine power. In the distant future, there is even hope for strong divine power, which is much stronger than many Titan ancient gods. My brother Epidus once asked me for a wife. Although he did not ask for it, my daughters other than the true gods were not worthy of his status. I originally wanted to choose between Climon and Metis, but now it seems that I don't need to choose. Oceano's tone was very happy, and Thesis nodded in approval. Having many children, letting the oceanic gods spread all over the world, and using marriages to win over the gods, this was their plan from the beginning. Later myths also proved his success. Unlike his brothers, except for Rhea and Themis, Oceanus was the only Titan who still had some power in the era of Zeus. I will talk to Climon about this. As the goddess of fame, marrying a noble Titan is also in line with her priesthood, and she will be satisfied with it. As Oceanus's virtuous wife, Thesis took the initiative to accept this task. Okay, I hope she can give birth to a powerful god for my brother. In this way, when we face my uncle in the future, we can have an extra helper. Nodding to his wife, Oceanus got up and went to the front hall. His sudden departure just now must have caused a lot of speculation among the guests, but now, he can happily inform them of the good news. From today on, the name of wise Metis will resound throughout the sea, and no one can criticize him with only numbers. Styx is just an accident. Behind him, Thesis looked at his daughter again, and then left the hall. She was inspecting the ocean currents, preparing to extract essence from the sea area ruled by her husband, combine it with the priesthood, and breed a divine weapon. Although this primitive casting method is relatively ordinary and not as powerful as the one made by the Cyclops who has special talents in forging, it is enough to exist as a symbol of the Lord of the Ocean. Thesis is going to continue to prepare for this. As for his daughter Metis, the gods are immortal, and she does not need to be taken care of all the time. Chapter 35 Desire gives birth to love, and love gives birth to beauty. In the Ocean Temple, Ryan granted the priesthood, and the next moment, he left the original place with the help of the characteristics of the spirit world. Except for the Sinai Mountain, the time and space of the spirit world are more and more chaotic as you go deeper. Above the third level, it is already a deep level of the spirit world, where it is very likely that one step forward will be thousands of miles away in reality. Although only the first two levels of the spirit world have been fully constructed, this does not affect Ryan's use of the characteristics of other levels. So in an instant, he came to the sea thousands of miles away. This is because the scope of the spirit world in the world is too small. Otherwise, with the help of this movement method named Spirit World Shuttle by Ryan, he can travel between the two sides of the Earth in more than 10 minutes. When life is born on Earth in the future, my divine power will accumulate to more than level 16, which can weaken the barrier between the surface of the spiritual world and the real world. At that time, life with high innate inspiration can directly see a layer of the spiritual world. Some spiritual bodies with deep obsessions or respected by sacrifices can also stay in the shallow layer of the spiritual world and survive in another way. Thinking secretly in his heart, Ryan looked back in the direction of the Ocean Temple. It is rumored in later generations that a considerable part of Zeus's wisdom comes from Metis, but now, Metis's priesthood is bestowed by Ryan. But it's hard to say. Rather than saying that Zeus's wisdom comes from Metis, I believe that he just borrowed her name. It's not so good to swallow a god and use her divine power. What's more, Zeus's sweet words may not be inferior to Metis's wisdom if he can deceive the goddess of wisdom. Shaking his head, Ryan walked towards a place near the sea in the direction of his memory. After trying to digest the origin for 800 years in the spirit world, Ryan finally came out, but he didn't plan to go back immediately. At least, he wanted to get something there. Here we are. 7 days later, after crossing a long sea, Ryan came to a special sea surface. There were no wind and waves here, and the sea surface was as quiet as death. But when the sun shone on it, there was a sacred beauty. Not far away, a layer of blood foam exuding desire and hatred floated there. This is the source of all the changes in this sea area. Even Pontus himself was unwilling to come here. Because this is where Uranus's organs fell, it contains his hatred for Titan and Pontus. In the future, Erinyes and Aphrodite will be born here one after another. As the birthplace of the four gods, when the blood of the king of gods disappears, this place will also become a sacred sea area. Who are you? This is the domain of the Lord of the Near Sea. Strange god, tell me your name. Suddenly, accompanied by a slightly strange tone, a half-snake, half-fish monster emerged. She looked directly at Ryan not far away, with a vigilant look, but did not act casually. Because the divine power on the other party let her know that this was at least a god of medium power. As one of the 5 children of Pontus, she and her brother and husband Phorcys are all half-god and half-monster lives. They gave birth to many sea monsters together, the most famous of which are the 3 sisters of Grey. They appeared in the image of old women, but the 3 of them shared one eye and one tooth. They are in charge of vicious, violent and terror, but they are not true gods, but only quasi-gods who have power and immortality, just like those ocean goddesses without priesthood. Keto, the danger of the sea, I know you. Ryan did not look at her, let alone answer her question. Compared to Eurybia, the power of the sea, and Nereus, the friendliness of the sea, Keto and her brother are more like Cyclops, and are disliked by the gods of chaos. There is no way, the gods of chaos have always looked at faces. But I don't know you, strange god. This is the sea area that was turned into a restricted area by the Father God, and all the gods know this. Keto's expression became more and more unfriendly. Compared with normal gods, she was more affected by instinct. It doesn't matter, Ryan said, and an interesting idea suddenly popped up in his mind. The important thing is, do you want to change your appearance? Get rid of your current appearance, or at least have another appearance recognized by the gods? Keto's increasingly ferocious face froze. Ryan's repeated irrelevant answers made Keto, who was controlled by animal nature to a certain extent, a little angry. She originally planned to follow her instinct and attack Ryan, but the words that followed made her regain her reason immediately. She had claimed more than once that she didn't care about her appearance, but when the banquet of the gods refused to let her in, only she knew what she was thinking. What should I do? The voice suddenly softened, and Ryan could hear it, although this softness was still harsh. Without keeping him in suspense, Ryan pointed to the blood foam in front of him. Drink them, of course, only a small part. If you dare to drink them all, you will only be the mother and give birth to 4 new gods. But if you only drink a few sips, you may get unexpected gains. Keto hesitated. As the danger of the sea, she knew very well that this was the most dangerous place in this sea area, and the source of danger was this blood. She didn't know whether she should believe the words of this strange god, but she was too eager to change. It's up to you to drink it or not, but this may be your only chance. Ryan stretched out his hand and scooped a spoonful of blood from the front of him, then his figure flashed and disappeared silently on the sea. He came here for this purpose, and it was unexpected to meet Keto. Wait. He hurriedly spoke, looking at Ryan's disappearing figure. Keto wanted him to speak more clearly. But Ryan obviously didn't have time to pay attention to her, he was just in the mood, and reminded her casually, just for fun. Damn it! Roared, but with a faint desire in his heart, Keto still focused his eyes on the blood foam. For a long time, a struggle appeared on her hideous face, but in the end, Keto's desire for beauty still overcame her instinct. She no longer cared about the danger of the blood in front of her and swallowed it in big gulps. As the blood entered her stomach, her appearance did change. At a certain moment, she stopped swallowing and looked at her shadow on the sea. A beautiful black-haired goddess appeared there, and the wildness in her eyes added a bit of charm to her. But at this moment, Keto did not feel happy, but instead felt jealous of those who were truly beautiful. She knew that she was now also a goddess of beauty, it was just that she was a beautiful disguise and a false disguised beauty. At the same time, under the influence of her priesthood, she understood that the true god of love and beauty would be born in these blood foams in the future, and her dressing up was meaningless in front of the other party, and could only become the green leaves that set off the flowers. Nothing is eternal. One day I will become the real beauty. If not, let them all die. As long as there is no one more beautiful than me, I will still be the synonym of beauty. The voice was no longer hoarse, but the pleasant tone spoke cruel words. Keto looked at the blood foam on the sea and swore secretly in his heart. The future god of love and beauty was her destined enemy. After staring for a long time, when the sun set, Keto left here. According to the time in her memory, she rushed to the palace of a god, where a party seemed to be held. The future was still far away, and now she also wanted to experience the feeling of other gods enjoying the banquet. This time, she would not be rejected again. Chapter 36, Gathering of the Gods. Leon casually enlightened an alternative goddess of beauty, and he didn't take it to heart. Keto actually had no presence in later generations. Only her monster children appeared in human epics, and then used to highlight the great achievements of demigod heroes. As a monster compared with Typhon, the king of all monsters, she is not even as good as Typhon's descendants. But now, as a god, Keto may leave some new traces in the history of chaos. Since the birth of Metis, Keto has been reborn, and another 700 years have passed. The world never revolves around one person. Although Ryan has lived in seclusion for 700 years, it has not affected the prosperity of Chaos World at all. 100 years after returning to the spirit world, a bright moon hung again in the sky of Chaos, which had been dim for 900 years. That was the daughter of Hyperion and Thea, the moon goddess Selene. This goddess, who should have been powerful in her original trajectory, was extremely weak because she had lost all concepts related to the moon. Her limit was only weak divine power, thanks to the moon being the largest luminous celestial body in the night sky. This incident greatly annoyed Hyperion. He suppressed his son because the sun could not be divided into two parts, but Selene, as his daughter, should have been his best helper in ruling the starry sky, but the result disappointed him greatly. For this reason, Hyperion hesitated for a long time, but he finally came to the underworld. After all, in his opinion, as long as he did not seek prophecy from Ryan and let himself be caught in the net of fate, the so-called spiritual god would not be scary. The two gods of the Dark Night who had retreated probably made the same mistake as two generations of god kings and tied their own hands and feet because of the prophecy. Therefore, Hyperion searched everywhere in the underworld. He tried to find Ryan and let him return the concept of the moon. The sun god was unwilling to trouble himself for a sister with whom he had an average relationship, but it was different for his daughter who was expected to have powerful divine power. But in the face of Hyperion's actions, Ryan was too lazy to pay attention, so after searching for several years, the sun god could only release power around the dark moon in anger, but he couldn't touch the light body in front of him. Hyperion, who returned empty-handed, went to Kronos again. He thought that Ryan relied on the order of the God King to take away Selene's power. As long as Kronos cancelled this order, the concept of the moon would return to its original owner. But Kronos decisively rejected the other party. Not to mention that the previous ownership of the moon was his oath to the world, even if it was not. He would not give this brother who had always been at odds with him a good face. Besides, others don't know, but Kronos knows it very well. Referring to his own origin of time and space, it is known that the concept of moon may indeed be controlled by Ryan because of the authority of the God King before it converged. In the past, but after it passed, it was probably gone without return. So in order to cover up the truth of his own origin loss, Kronos is even less likely to agree to this rude request. Hyperion was furious after being rejected repeatedly, but he was helpless as he felt the increasingly powerful aura of the God King. In the end, he had to return to the sky and vent his anger to the surroundings. So during that time, the sun in the sky released its power wantonly, and the temperature of the whole world rose accordingly. Fortunately, the earth at this time was basically full of gods, so there was no disaster. However, because of this incident, Chaos, the third generation of gods, also learned that in the underworld, there was an ancient god who controlled the moon and spirituality, but he rarely came out. After a few years, Astraeus and Eos were born one after another. The former is the son of Eurybia, the god of weather and sea power, and the god of stars. The latter is Hyperion's second daughter, the goddess of dawn. Unlike the records in the myth, there was no rape this time. In other words, Ryan didn't think this myth was true. It is said that Eos was cursed by the goddess of love and beauty to fall in love with mortals, but judging from her later actions, she did not seem like a goddess who kept herself clean. So just over 100 years later, the two new gods came together spontaneously. They gave birth to the four wind gods and many star gods, most of whom were quasi-gods without priesthood. There was only one exception among the star gods, and she was Astraea, the star of justice and the goddess of purity. Although she was not powerful as a genuine true god, she was regarded as a leader by a group of star gods. The wind gods Anenes were much more powerful. They tore off part of the priesthood from their grandfather, the god of weather, and represented the winds in four directions. They were Boreas, the god of the north wind, Notos, the god of the south wind, Oros, the god of the east wind, and Zephyros, the god of the west wind. With their birth, the airflow and chaos became more variable. At the same time, on the land and in the ocean, the three ash goddesses and the three goddesses of revenge were born one after another. They were transformed from the blood of Uranus. The former was called Meliads, and the latter was called Arines. Perhaps because of the danger of the sea, Keto had drunk the blood of the three goddesses of vengeance before they were born, so they regarded Keto as their eldest sister and stayed in the ocean with her. The three ash tree goddesses came to Mount Odalis to pay homage to the god king and were brought by Rhea, who had become the queen of God. On the other side, Epidus on the sacred mountain also had his own son of God. He and his niece Clymen, the daughter of the Lord of the Ocean, gave birth to three gods successively, and they all became famous in later generations. The original god of strength, and later the sky supporter Atlas. The creator of bronze humans, the four-sided fire thief Prometheus, and the late awakening fool Epimetheus. Unlike his two weak brothers, Atlas showed extraordinary power since the day he was born and had the potential to become a powerful god. For this reason, the Lord of the Ocean came to congratulate his nephew-grandson on his birth and wished him never to be invaded by the ocean. Of course, while his brothers were working hard, Oceanus, who loved childbearing, was not idle. Over the past 700 years, thousands of children were born in the world of chaos, and rivers and lakes began to spread all over the land. Most of them were regional gods, but there were still a few true gods. They were Eurinum of the watergrass pasture, Perseus, the goddess of boiling water, Pronoa, the goddess of foresight, Doris, the goddess of gentleness, and Philara, the goddess of healing. Because of the increase in children, the conflict between Pontus and Oceanus became more intense. Their children had fought several times on the sea, but there was no obvious result. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that if it were not for the concern for the king of gods on the sacred mountain, perhaps the war between these two sea gods would have broken out long ago. In addition, during the birth of many gods, something happened that puzzled the gods. It was probably 1,000 years after Kronos ascended the throne, and many mountain gods and river gods on Earth noticed that an emerald green light flew out from the ground and headed towards the residence of the Earth Mother by the East Sea. After that, Chaos Earth shook inexplicably for 3 years. It was the anger of the Earth Mother, but there was no follow-up result. Later, the god King Kronos came to visit the Earth Mother to borrow the life bottle, but returned empty-handed. It was not until the goddess of justice and the queen of gods Rhea came with him to ask for it that they got what they wanted. But to the disappointment of the three Titan gods as the source of chaos life, the life bottle can indeed create living beings, but none of them have consciousness. In desperation, Themis had to give up the idea of creating life and continue her preparations. So hundreds of years passed, and the preparations that lasted for 1,500 years came to an end. On this day, the god of justice and law finally stood on Mount Odile and began to legislate for the world.